So that's a big, long title. But ultimately, you guys are all here, and I really want to give you guys thank you so much for spending your President's Day holiday with us here. And considering that you've heard a lot of workforce development roundtables, conferences, get-togethers. The fact that you're here, I hope this has been useful for you, because our ultimate goal here is that so many of you have had all these great ideas. We're not alone. How do we pull all these ideas together and work together to maybe figure out these issues together? So that said, we have a three-pronged approach, all right? So today, you have a takeaway, one specific takeaway, what you can do now and get in front of possible workers. And this is where you'd reach out to Chris for more guidance. So Chris Jarnack is available to do more of this one-on-one with your companies.
So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with you here today. I spend most of my life either on stage at conferences or workshops like this, but a third of my life is working with individual companies. I come in and I build a 4-person team inside your organization. We spend a day together at your site. And then over the next 2 months, there's 4 or 6 hours of virtual coaching where I teach you guys to recruit, retain, and develop talent and build a team that can do it as long, for the next 10 years if you want to. So I'm going to sneak out and make this call, but there's information on the back table. There are some books back there as well. Feel free to take one, and if not for you, please spread the word because I'd be happy to help. All right? Thank you for the opportunity.
I actually heard he's going to order a new Porsche.
Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate it. So that's today, what you can do today. So tomorrow, everything that we're going to be asking you today, we want you to think about, all right? What kinds of training are you looking for? What kind of training do you need? What kind of needs for your workers are you looking for, all right? Because what we're going to ask is that we start beginning to sort of map this out for a long-term strategy of how we can pool our resources and provide worker supports for the short term and the long term when we're thinking about, could it be climate change? Could it be immigration? How do we prepare for more people coming into our region and be able to have that support there? Because what our workers now need are going to be the same things that workers in the future are going to need. So we are in phase 1, all right? And so today is kind of the kickoff for phase 1. And we wish to engage all of you. And we're asking for your permission to gather data. So we've talked today about what the demographics are. So we've found out that, we've had COVID deaths, we've got fewer births, we've got more deaths, we've got tightened immigration. We've learned that we need to understand the considerations. Even though that jobs grew, our population shrank, our poverty's increased. We've learned about barriers to employment when we think about childcare, housing, transportation, mental and physical issues. We've talked about management decisions that can act as barriers that Chris has very specifically spoken to. And then we talked about maybe understanding some untapped populations, which I'd like to also add. One of the untapped populations is the developmentally disabled, all right, the diverse ability. Huge population that we can still be tapping into. 70% of this population wants to work but is not engaged in the workforce. So how do we get to these different populations? And so knowing that, this is our ask, all right? This is our ask. We want to do a series of surveys, all right? The first survey is asking you as employers. We're asking about your talent recruitment, retention needs, and the opportunity to identify gaps based on what we see. It's a 20 question survey. We will send that out to you guys after this meeting, and we will aggregate that data to show and share with you what we find. The second ask at that second meeting, which will be a virtual meeting that we are looking to set up in March, April timeframe, is that we're also asking to do an employee survey. Now, this employee survey is asking those questions about what are the needs around childcare, housing, transportation, mental, physical health. Because if we can get that information, did you guys see all of those really cool maps? We want to map that out. Because if we could map out where those concentrations of needs are, all of a sudden now we're hitting economies of scale. We can actually go in and deploy state resources, community resources. We have WIDA here, you know, Wisconsin Housing Economic Development Authority, all right? They are here at the table. They want to build more housing. So Rebecca and Jeff, wave your hands, yep. Want to be at the table. And I know our communities, and you guys talk about workforce housing, but how can we do it that makes sense? We have developers that are willing to come into our rural communities and build. So we have communities that have identified land that is infrastructure ready. How do we put all these pieces together? The state wants to see data-driven analysis about where they should put their resources. So let's get them that data. So that's what we're asking for your employee, for the employee survey. So all of these kinds of questions. And then if we're able to, we're also going to be working with agencies with the same questions for employees with our unemployed too. We may or may not get as great of a response, but let's start with our employees for certain that are currently employed. So that's the ask. And so once we get this information, then we go into phase 2, and that's analyzing the data.
Have you figured out we love maps? Mapping is a huge resource. We can talk about community assets and we can actually put them together and make heat maps. You're supposed to push the next button. Which we can show these visual correlations very quickly. And we can show them to different groups and we can tailor them to show correlations. I already said that. So that we can make analyses.
So this is an example of a heat map about childcare deserts and who has access to it. And just to revisit this example with Lactalis,
we can then take that data and use it to apply for funding. We can use it to apply real-world solutions to what we are seeing. You have all of your employees' addresses, don't you? I hope so. This is a real map, real-life data that we can use to then find a real-life solution. Do you think these people need childcare too? Great. We can use data that was driven and made for transportation and apply it to, oh, where do people live that need childcare? Same place.
and what's nice about this was just one employer. So can you imagine if we were able to share that cost over multiple employers? And so then we get to those economies of scale, all right? We're using our dollars wisely. It just requires collaboration. And we've got people at the table. You guys, again, are at the cutting edge. You're willing to be innovators by participating. So this is what our goal is. So the outcomes and actions here, you know, if we can identify this through our heat maps, you know, we can be very specific about how we deploy those resources, all right? We can start talking about those best practices. So for example, in Amory, Wisconsin, they identified about 6 employers that needed childcare. So what the school district was able to do, they turned on Fund 80. They were able to use that fund, get additional monies to be able to set up childcare within the school district and be able to provide benefits for childcare, all right? And then the employers would buy slots in order to pay a living wage, a reasonable wage, and provide benefit. So we've got a real life example that we can deploy here. We have identified spaces across the region in terms that are ready to go for infrastructure and that have potential community incentives and it's land available. We can bring those developers there to come build. We've seen best practices where a local business has decided, you know, our people, they lose too much time going to the doctor. You know, let's court one of the hospitals to open up a clinic in our industry park so then we don't lose time for those folks to go out and then all of our employees' families have access to that health care as well. All right? That is one of your best job retention. It's not more wages. Once they did research with some of these Fortune 500 companies, they realized that it's not about the job, it's about making it easier for their employees. If they have a childcare located on site, people will actually take lower wages because now they have access to their kiddos on site, all right? So if we're having these kinds of support mechanisms, all of a sudden you've increased the value proposition. It's no longer about the wage, it's about my quality of life, all right? There's a great book, it's called Company Towns. We used to do this in the United States. You know, companies used to provide the support services for their employees. They ended up spending their money at the company shop. They ended up paying their mortgages to the company housing. I mean, it seems kind of like a little monopoly, but the workers were taken care of. There were great examples and there are bad examples of it. But we have this in history. We are not inventing anything new. We're just working together in these tough times to figure out what exactly we need to do. So the location and concentration of needs for that strategic deployment of resources is our ultimate goal for this. So our next steps is that we need to have this future employer roundtable event. We're going to be having a discussion. This discussion is about 75 minutes long. We're going to recap today's events very briefly. We're recording all of this. And so this is going to be edited into small bite-sized portions that we're going to ask you to share with your leadership. Share throughout your company and through your contacts so that we can get those critical mass, because the more people we have into this, that means we're sharing that cost. So we're going to be sending you out a survey, and the survey, we're going to have you fill out that survey. It's an employer survey. We'll have about 3 to 4 weeks that you guys will have to complete it. Encourage you guys to complete it. And then we'll also be setting up a dual time to set up the date and time for when we meet. We'll be having 6 virtual discussions throughout our region. And at these discussions, we're hoping that around in Crawford County or Richland, we have a concentrated mass, a critical mass to start moving forward. And this poll will select the date, the times that work best for you. If you're unable to make it in your region, we can still collect that data. You should still come to the virtual meeting that works best for you. And from there, we will debut a draft of, you will see the employer survey results, but we'll also go over the employee survey. You'll receive a draft of that so you feel comfortable about what's being disseminated. And we have a third-party consultant that will be managing this process. And we've got Kristen back there, and I don't know where Dana went, but there's Dana. This is Redevelopment Resources. They are our consultant that we've hired to manage all this data, to aggregate all this data, to map all this data. So then that way, there's anonymity, so your employees can feel comfortable and safe that they are reporting in honesty. And it's a good benchmark to see everything that you guys think of your culture, is it being reflected? All right, going back to Chris's comments, you know, what you hope to be achieving, is it being achieved? It's a good taking a pulse moment. So you'll get to review the surveys and we'll have questions and answer. And from there, once we start building out the mapping, and if you guys are interested, you guys all have filled out those pieces of paper that have those questions. If you're interested in learning more about, you know, the PERM program, all right, or about Mission Wisconsin, we can set up virtual meetings where we can bring those people on board and you can talk directly to them. And I guarantee you they are as fun as Chris, if not more so, if that's even possible. So we're bringing to you resources that you can actually use and you can start planning for the long term. If you're interested in childcare, we can give you best practices associated with it. We just need that information filled out. Am I missing anything here? I think that's the ask. So, how are we feeling so far? This seem reasonable? I'm seeing some nods, that's good. Any head shakes? This is not something I can do? No, that's good. Okay. Any questions or comments for today's meeting? Oh, what am I missing? Oh, that's right. Since we're all here, who has filled out their, oh, you guys, okay. Who as a table would like to share any of their takeaways from today? I'd like to just go around with any brief takeaways that folks would care to share. Tasha, you had your hand up as a brave soul. You did.
Job seekers aren't taught how to find a job. To me, that was just really ear-catching, and finding a way to attract them and find them ourselves and show them what they're looking for, what they want, or what they think they want.
Jessica, did you have your hand up to share? No. Would you like to share? No. Oh, Tim.
I'll share a few thoughts. I think it's been a great conference today. Tremendous presentation, information, ideas, and Chris. So a lot of you know me. I'm Tim McGettigan from Darlington, Wisconsin. Lived there most of my life. Come back from school to work at the bank there. And then I've been involved with workforce development years ago and now with regional planning. But the thing I think I'm taking away today, even though I'm in a retired position, but hopefully people will ask me because of some of the things I do and some of the things I've been involved with. But I was involved in banking for 40 years, and I managed the bank probably for 15 years. And I increased our employment from 12 people to 33 people. And it was unbelievable the services that we offered in that small community bank and grew the bank and grew its profits. And I thought we did a pretty good job. The sad part was the bank got sold out from under my family. We had a pretty good interest, but I still couldn't prevent it from happening. But the one thing I want to say, and I hope you feel the same, you appreciate this conference that's put together today, but I've learned a lot just sitting here as a retired person of things I could have done better to help myself, to help the bank, to help my customers, to help my community. So I hope a lot of you go back now and utilize a lot of this information, what we've heard today, and the associations that you made. So I thank you very, very much for this conference. And it's been very, very helpful. I hope you feel the same. So just join me in giving these people a great hand in the job they've done in the conference that they've put together today.